Hey everybody, it's Mr. Cassandra doing a video to present chapter 7.2, which is the converse of the Pythagorean theorem. The converse of the Pythagorean theorem is used to classify a triangle by angle. So if you remember, there's three types of triangle that you can classify by angle. That is an acute triangle, a right triangle, or an obtuse triangle. So how could you tell, using the Pythagorean theorem, whether or not a triangle is acute, right, or obtuse? Well, first of all, you need to know what the three sides of the triangle are. And then you want to put them in order from the shorter sides to the longer side. So you need to identify the longest side of the triangle. Notice how I labeled the longest side with an L, okay? The other two sides, it doesn't make a difference which order you do it in, okay? Those two sides would be the quote-unquote legs if they were a right triangle. So if you take the longest side and you square it, and you take the other two sides and you square them and find their sum, then one of three things could either happen. Either the leg squared plus leg squared equals the longest side squared, which would be the hypotenuse, and that is a right triangle. So if the longest side square is equal to the sum of the squares of the other sides, then it's a right triangle. Now, the other thing that can happen is that the sum of the squares of the other two sides are greater than the longest side squared, or the sum of the other two sides squared is less than the longest side squared. Now, if the longest side squared is greater, which means the alligator or the Pac-Man eats the bigger number, then this triangle would be obtuse. This triangle would be obtuse. If the sum of the other two sides squared is greater than the longest side, in other words, the longer side is actually shorter, well, then that would make this an acute triangle. So you just gotta take a look at these, keep these, write these down in your notebook, and then consult them when it's time to answer the question. Now, what kind of questions are you gonna have? Well, the first kind of question that you get on this homework assignment is, tell whether or not a triangle is a right triangle. So if I want to know if a triangle is a right triangle, I have to identify the longest side. So in number 1, that's the longest side. In number 2, that's the longest side. 17 is bigger than 8 or 15. And then number 3, that's the longest side. Then I'm going to square the other two, add it together, and square that one and find out if it's equal. If it's equal, then it's a right triangle. So I did number 1 for you. Actually, that's not true. My son did number 1. I was trying to keep him out of trouble, so he took the notes for you. So if you look at number 1, 15 squared plus 20 squared, and then he put a blank there, right? And then you have 25 squared. So 15 squared, 15 times 15 is 225. 20 squared, 20 times 20 is 400. Add them together. The left-hand side is 625. When you square 25, 25 times 25 is 625. Aha! They are equal, which means that a squared plus b squared was equal to the longest side squared, which is the hypotenuse squared, and that is a right triangle. Now, take a look at number 3. 16, 21, and 24. So, 16, 21, and 24. Notice how the longest side is the one that's by itself. 21 squared plus 16 squared, blank 24 squared. So 21 squared is 441, 16 squared is 256, 24 squared is 576. And if you add the left side together, you get 697, and you have 576 on the right side, which is 24 squared, and the left side is bigger than the right side, which means the longest side squared is less than the sum of the a squared plus b squared. And when that happens, it is not a right triangle, because if it was a right triangle, they would be equal. And you could take this a step further and say that it's an acute triangle, even though they didn't ask you to do that. Okay, so what other type of problem do you get in this section? Instead of drawing you a picture, they might just give you 3 sides of a triangle, like 6, 8, 10, or 5, 7, 9, or 8, 9, 10, or 10, 12, 30. So this is a practice A worksheet. So they made it easy for you. They didn't do any decimals or fractions or square roots, and they put the longest side third in all of these. They didn't scramble it up for you. So that's good. I'm probably not going to give you anything too much more challenging than this anyway. So we're going to stick to the basics here. Now, look at how there's 2 parts to this question. The first one says, decide whether the numbers can represent the side lengths of a triangle. The second part says, if they can, classify the triangle as acute, right, or obtuse. Now, this first one up here, this is from chapter, I believe it was 5.5, I think, which was triangle inequalities. So the first thing is to decide whether or not it can even make a triangle. Well, how do you check to see if it can make a triangle? Well, you take the 2 smaller sides and you subtract them and you add them, and the third side has to be between those 2 sides. So the first thing you're checking for all of these problems would be, can you even make a triangle? So if you look over here off to the right, 8 minus 6 is 2, 8 plus 6 is 14, and 10 is between 2 and 14, so therefore it can make a triangle. Now you can go to the next part of the problem. So, once again, for number 4, the 3 side lengths are 6, 8, and 10. 8 minus 6 is 2. 8 plus 6 is 14. 10 is between there, so it can make a triangle. Now, what kind of triangle is it going to be? Well, this is the longest side here. These are the other 2 sides. 6 squared plus 8 squared blank, 10 squared. 6 squared is 36. 8 squared is 64. Together they add up to 100. 10 squared is 100. That means the left side and the right side are equal. So it is a right triangle. And that's all there is to it. Now, take a look at number 5. Number 5, the side lengths are 5, 7, and 9. So can it make a triangle? Well, let's see. If the side lengths are 5, 7, and 9, 7 minus 5 is 2. 7 plus 5 is 12. Is 9, that's supposed to be a 9, is 9 between 2 and 12? Yes, therefore it can make a triangle. Now I know you're probably saying to yourself, well, when is it not going to make a triangle? I'll do an example of that next, but I just wanted to move on with this problem because the next thing we have to do is, we know it makes a triangle. What kind of triangle is it? Is it acute? Is it obtuse? Or is it a right triangle? Well, I've got to identify the longest side. 5 squared plus 7 squared blank 9 squared. 9 squared is 81. 25 plus 49 is 74. And 74 is less than 81. And since this side is less than the longest side squared, then that means it's not a right triangle, but it is a obtuse triangle. Okay? So the question then that's on your mind is, when is it not going to be a triangle? Well, number 7 has side lengths of 10, 12, and 30. So for number 7, the first step is, if I've got, what was it again? 10, 12, and 30. So once again, this is the longest side. Now what about these 2 sides here? 12 minus 10 is 2, and 12 plus 10 is 22. Well, wait a minute. If I've got side lengths of 10 and 22, and 10 and 12, and their difference is 2 and their sum is 22, is 30 between 2 and 22? And the answer is absolutely not. So this is not a triangle. Okay? All right, and last but not least on this, this worksheet here is to graph the triangles and determine whether or not the triangle is acute, right, or obtuse. So you plot the points. If you forget how to plot the points, the first coordinate is the x, the second coordinate is the y, okay? You go left or right. The x coordinate is left or right, and the y is up or down, and you're doing that from the origin. So if I wanted to plot the point 1, 5, 1, 5 tells me to go right 1 and up 5 from the origin. Right 1, up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is the point 1, 5. B says right 1 and up 1. So that's the point 1, 1. And C is right 6 and up 1. And there's your graph. Now, number 10, I wouldn't really ask you for any other work for. There's absolutely no more work that you have to do for that because you can see that AB is a vertical line because the A and the B both share the same x coordinate, so they line up one on top of each other. And you can see that BC, they share the same y coordinate, so they are a horizontal line. Well, obviously, if you have a vertical line and a horizontal line, you would have a right angle, right? And then I plotted all the rest of these, and you can see number 11, you can see that is definitely opened up to more than a 90-degree angle, because a 90-degree angle would be here, and that's opened up wider than that. So that's definitely an obtuse angle. And I don't think I would ask you to do anything else there. Number 12, you can definitely see they're all less than 90, so that's an acute triangle. And but I want you to look at number 13. Number 13, like if I said, hey, that's a right triangle, and then somebody else said, well, that's an obtuse triangle, prove it. Well, how could you prove that something is a right triangle? Well, first of all, I could compare the slopes. So if you can look at the slope of AB, the slope of AB is down 2 and right 2. So down 2 and right 2, if you remember from the slope chapter, would be a slope of -2 over +2 or -1. Now what about the slope of AC, this line here? The slope of AC is up 1, 2, 3, 4 and right 1, 2, 3, 4. So up 4 and right 4 means it has a slope of 1. Well, what do you know about the slopes of 1 and -1? Well, 1 and -1 have opposite reciprocal slopes. That makes them perpendicular. So if there was like a little bit of a challenge question, they wanted you to prove it, you can do it by slopes. You also could use the distance formula to find out how long each of these segments are, and you can use the converse of the Pythagorean theorem. So that's it. I'm not going to go on too much more about it. So these are the types of problems you're going to have for homework. If there is a different type of problem, please try to utilize the examples in the book and the notes that we did and try and figure it out. I had some private meetings with people yesterday who needed help on stuff, and I'm happy to do that. So make sure you reach out to me if you need to set up a one-on-one Google Meet between 9 and 1 o'clock. And also feel free to send me a private comment. Okay? Good luck. I think this is going to be one of the easier assignments. Just giving you a heads up also. Friday is going to be a Google Meeting day and a makeup day. And you're going to have Friday and over the weekend to catch up on some work. Okay? Please make sure you are following directions. That's the biggest obstacle right now. Have a good night.